Cartoon 1. The stars above the celestial accord station burned cold and distant like watching eyes from another age. Inside the grand chamber, polished floors reflected the soft glow of alien lights, and towering delegates from 200 different worlds stood in silence. Among them, Daniel Shaw adjusted his dark blue Earth uniform, the silver pin of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps gleaming faintly on his lapel. He was not the tallest nor the loudest, but his presence carried weight. People listened when he spoke, not because he shouted, but because he meant every word. Daniel had spent the last 6 months shuttling between the Krell Dominion and the Virian Concord, two powerful factions locked in a bitter dispute over the Helios Belt, a stretch of resource-rich asteroids near Earth's outer colonies. Both sides claimed ancient rights to the region. Both refused to back down. The Galaxy Empire, led by the Krell, had grown impatient. They saw the Virians as rebels and Earth as meddlers. But Daniel believed peace was still possible. He had seen too much war in his youth, back when Earth's nations fought over scraps while the stars watched in silence. He would not let that happen again, not on his watch. The Peace Summit began on a tense morning. Delegates filed into the amphitheater-style hall, their voices a low hum of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. The Krell representative, High Overseer Vraktal, stood tall on his 4-jointed legs, his armored carapace glinting under the lights. His voice, when it came through the translator, was sharp and cold. The Virians have stolen what belongs to the Empire. They hide behind human shields. This ends now. The Virian envoy, a slender being with iridescent skin named Lyra Solon, responded calmly. We seek only what our ancestors mined for centuries. The Empire arrived late and claimed all. That is not law. That is greed. Daniel stepped forward. Gentle beings, he began, his voice steady. Earth does not take sides. We offer neutral ground, shared oversight, and fair distribution of resources. No one needs to lose everything. For a moment, hope flickered. Then alarms blared, security drones swarmed the chamber, red lights pulsed. A Krell officer shoved past protocol guards and pointed a clawed finger at Daniel. He is the spy, the officer hissed. He gave Virian scouts our patrol routes. Our ships were ambushed last night. 30 Krell warriors dead. Daniel's eyes widened. That's not true. I've never... Before he could finish, armored enforcers seized him. The Virian delegation protested, but their voices were drowned out. The Krell declared emergency powers under the Empire's wartime charter. There would be no trial, no evidence review, no appeal. Within hours, Daniel Shaw was dragged to the central observation deck, the very place where he had once watched Earthrise with quiet awe. Now he stood alone, wrists bound, facing a galaxy that had turned its back. High Overseer Vraktal addressed the gathered species via live feed. Justice must be swift. Betrayal cannot be tolerated. Let this be a lesson to all who would deceive the Empire. Daniel did not beg. He looked straight into the camera, his voice calm despite the fear in his chest. Tell Earth. I did my best. Tell them. Peace is still worth fighting for. Then the Krell activated the airlock. The door opened. Space yawned wide and black. Daniel Shaw was pulled out by magnetic tethers, his body twisting slowly in the void. Millions watched as he vanished into the endless dark. The broadcast cut to static. On Earth, it was early evening in Geneva. People gathered around public screens in parks, cafes, and homes. Children stopped playing. Workers froze in factories. In the United Earth Assembly Building, silence fell like a stone. No one spoke for a full minute. Then someone sobbed. Then another. Then the room erupted, not in panic, but in rage. News channels replayed the footage again and again. Social feeds exploded with grief and fury. Hashtags like Tiber Remember Shaw and Blood for Peace trended across every continent. In Tokyo, a crowd marched on the old Imperial Palace grounds, now a peace memorial. In Rio, dock workers refused to load cargo for off-world trade. In Nairobi, students painted murals of Daniel's face on city walls, his eyes staring into the future. Back at Strategic Defense Command beneath the Rockies, General Lena Ortiz watched the recording 3 times. She was a woman of few words and fewer regrets. Her father had died in the Martian dust riots. Her brother vanished during the Titan fuel crisis. She knew loss. But this was different. This was murder dressed as law. She called an emergency meeting, not with politicians, not with diplomats, with ship captains, engineers, and cyber warfare specialists. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment in Chicago, Eli Brooks stared at his screen. He had trained with Daniel during the Europa incident 10 years ago. They'd shared rations, stories, and a belief that humanity could rise above its past. Now Daniel was gone, executed like a criminal. Eli's hands trembled, not from fear, but from purpose. He packed a bag, deleted his civilian identity, sent one message, "I'm in." Across the Sol system, something shifted. Factories that once built solar harvesters began forging railgun cores. Orbital docks that serviced freighters now prepped warships hidden under civilian hulls. In lunar caverns, technicians powered up dormant reactors. Project Ironclad, long dismissed as a relic of paranoid cold void thinking, was no longer a file in a vault. It was real. The Galaxy Empire expected fear. They thought Earth would cower, apologize, and beg for mercy. They did not understand humans. Humans mourned their dead by honoring them, not with silence, but with action, and Daniel Shaw had not died for nothing. His death became a spark. In the days that followed, recruitment centers overflowed. Not just soldiers, engineers, medics, pilots, hackers, cooks, mechanics. Everyone wanted to help. Old rivalries between nations faded. The United States, China, Brazil, Nigeria, they all sent their best. For the first time in generations, Earth spoke with one voice. Lena Ortiz stood before the newly formed War Council. "They think we're weak because we talk peace," she said. "Let them learn the truth. Peace is not weakness, it's choice. And today we choose to fight." No one cheered. No one needed to. The look in their eyes said everything. Far above, in the silent dark where Daniel Shaw had taken his last breath, Earth's first stealth frigate slipped past Jupiter's shadow. Its mission was simple: find the truth, strike fast, and make the Empire regret the day they killed a human diplomat. The stars watched, and for the first time in centuries they saw something new in the void, not just light, but fire. Part 2. The United Earth Assembly Chamber sat heavy with silence. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows over empty seats. Most delegates had left after the emergency session, but a few remained. Heads bowed, hands clenched, faces pale with grief and anger. The air smelled of old paper, stale coffee, and something sharper: fear. Outside, crowds gathered in the plaza, holding candles and signs that read "Justice for Shaw" and "Earth Stands." But inside, the leaders of humanity argued in hushed tones about what came next. General Lena Ortiz stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the main screen showing the Krell homeworld. She wore her uniform without medals, just the plain gray of Earth's Strategic Defense Command. She had not slept in 2 days. Her voice when she spoke was low but firm. "They killed one of ours in cold blood. Broadcast it like a show. If we do nothing, they'll think we're afraid. And fear invites more blood." Opposite her, Ambassador Nora Kim shook her head. She had been Daniel Shaw's closest aide, his friend, and now his successor by grim necessity. "War is not the answer," she said softly. "We don't have their numbers. Their ships are faster, their weapons stronger. One battle could wipe out our entire fleet." Lena turned to her. "Then we don't fight their way. We fight ours." A murmur rippled through the room. Some nodded. Others looked away. The truth was, Earth's military had spent decades focused on peacekeeping, asteroid defense, and rescue operations. They had no experience with full-scale interstellar war. The Galaxy Empire, on the other hand, had crushed rebellions across 100 systems. Their doctrine was simple: show weakness and be erased. But Lena had spent her career studying that doctrine. She knew the Empire relied on speed, shock, and total control of information. What they didn't expect was chaos. And humans, she thought with a grim smile, were very good at chaos. While the assembly debated, ordinary people acted. In Houston, engineers rerouted power from civilian grids to hidden shipyards buried beneath the Gulf Coast. In Vladivostok, retired pilots returned to flight simulators, relearning dogfight patterns from old Martian border skirmishes. In Cairo, teenage coders built encryption tools to shield Earth's networks from Krell surveillance. No one gave orders. They just knew what had to be done. Deep in a lunar bunker, Project Ironclad came alive. The project had been shelved after the Titan Accords deemed too aggressive for a peaceful age. But its blueprints remained. Now, teams worked around the clock to assemble the first wave of Ironclad-class destroyers. sleek armored ships built for stealth and close-range combat. They lacked the Empire's plasma cannons, but they carried something new. Swarm drones, EMP pulse cores, and human crews who didn't just follow orders, they thought for themselves. Lena visited the lunar dock herself. She walked among the workers, many of them volunteers who hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. She stopped beside a young woman welding a thruster housing. "You signed up for this?" Lena asked. The woman wiped sweat from her brow. "My brother was on Mars Colony Theta. He watched Shaw die on the mess hall screen. We all did." She looked up, eyes hard. "I'm not waiting for them to come here." Lena nodded. That was all she needed to hear. Back on Earth, the public mood shifted from mourning to resolve. Schools held moments of silence, then turned to lessons on emergency response and signal encryption. Farmers donated food to military stockpiles. Musicians played songs of remembrance that quickly became anthems of resistance. Even children drew pictures of Earth ships chasing Krell vessels across the stars. Hope, once fragile, began to harden into purpose, but not everyone agreed. In the assembly, a faction led by Councilman Paul Reeves argued for restraint. "We must appeal to the Celestial Accord," he insisted. "Let neutral species judge the Krell's crime. War will only get more of us killed." Nora Kim listened carefully. She respected Paul, but she also knew the Accord was controlled by the Empire's allies. Justice there would be slow, if it came at all. Still, she pushed for one last diplomatic effort. She sent a formal request for an emergency hearing, citing galactic law and the right to due process. The reply came within hours, denied. The Krell called her petition an insult to imperial sovereignty. That night, Nora sat alone in Daniel's old office. His desk was still tidy, his coffee mug half full as if he'd just stepped out. She opened his personal log. The last entry read, "If peace fails, let it not be because we were afraid to try. But if violence comes, let it not be because we were too slow to act." She closed the log. Then she walked to Lena's command center. "I'm with you," she said simply. Lena didn't smile. She just handed her a data pad. "Good. You're going to need this." It was a list of covert operations already in motion. Operation Nightfall, Operation Silent Reach, Operation Ghostnet. Each one aimed at disrupting the Empire's supply chains, communications, and morale. Nora's role would be critical, not as a soldier, but as the voice that told the galaxy what Earth was really doing. Truth, she realized, could be a weapon too. Meanwhile, on Mars Colony Theta, life went on, but not as before. The colony's governor, a quiet man named Carl Dixon, had ordered all non-essential systems powered down. Energy was redirected to defense grids. Civilians trained in emergency drills. Children learned how to seal bulkheads and use medkits. Everyone knew the Krell might strike back. And if they did, Mars would not fall without a fight. In orbit above Jupiter, Captain Eli Brooks guided his scout ship through a field of ice fragments. His mission was simple: find Krell patrol routes near the Helios belt. He moved slowly, using the gas giant's magnetic storms to mask his signal. For 3 days, he saw nothing. Then, on the 4th night, he spotted it, a Krell supply convoy moving in perfect formation. He recorded their path, their frequency codes, their blind spots. Then he vanished back into the dark. His data reached Earth within hours. Lena studied it, then called her top captains. "They think the Helios drift is theirs," she said. "Let's show them it's a graveyard." Preparations began in secret. Ships were painted matte black. Engines were muffled. Crews trained in silent running. No comms, no lights, no mistakes. They practiced ambush tactics in asteroid fields, using rocks for cover and timing their strikes to the second. It was risky. One error and they'd be vaporized. But as one young pilot told his squad, better to die fighting than waiting. Back on Earth, the final decision came. The Assembly, after days of debate, voted narrowly to authorize defensive military action. Not war, officially, but everyone knew what it meant. Earth was no longer just reacting. It was preparing to hit back. Lena stood on the observation deck of Command Central, watching the sun set over the Rockies. The sky burned orange and red like fire across the horizon. She thought of Daniel Shaw floating alone in the void. She thought of the volunteers in Houston, the welder on the moon, the kids on Mars. She thought of all the quiet people who had chosen to stand up. They weren't soldiers by trade. They were teachers, farmers, students, builders. But today they were something more. They were Earth, and Earth, she knew, did not forgive easily. Part 3. The Krell supply convoy moved through the outer rim of the Helios belt, like a slow, armored serpent. 5 freighters, 2 escort destroyers, all painted in the Empire's dull bronze. Their sensors swept the void, but they saw nothing unusual, just rocks, dust, and the faint hum of distant stars. They did not notice the small dark shape clinging to the far side of asteroid 7 Gamma. Inside that shape, Captain Eli Brooks held his breath. His ship, the Nightjar, was barely larger than a cargo shuttle. Its hull was coated in radar-absorbing material stolen from old Earth stealth projects. No lights, no engine flare. Just silence. Eli watched the convoy on his screen, fingers resting lightly on the controls. He had been waiting for this moment for 12 days. 12 days of cold rations, recycled air, and the constant fear of detection. But he was ready. When the lead freighter passed within range, Eli tapped a single command. From hidden compartments along the Nightjar's belly, 6 micro-drones detached and drifted silently toward the Krell ships. Each drone carried a tiny pulse emitter and a data siphon. Their job was not to destroy, but to listen, to learn, and to lie. Within minutes, the drones latched onto the freighter's communication arrays. They began copying patrol schedules, fleet codes, and command frequencies. Then, using the Krell's own network, they sent false signals, reports of engine trouble, phantom sensor ghosts, fake distress calls from empty sectors. The Krell officers frowned at their consoles, confused. One escort veered off course to investigate a malfunction that didn't exist. The convoy's perfect formation cracked. Eli smiled. Chaos had begun. Back on Earth, teams of civilian hackers, calling themselves Shaw's Vengeance, watched the same data stream in real time. They worked from basements, university labs, and even old subway tunnels turned into command hubs. Led by a quiet college student named Marcus Lee, they had spent weeks reverse engineering Krell encryption. Now, with Eli's stolen codes, they broke through. That night, across the Galaxy Empire's vast network, something strange happened. Log entries vanished. Supply manifests changed. Ship assignments were shuffled. A Krell admiral in the Andromeda Reach received orders to deploy to a system that didn't exist. A weapons depot on Vexus Prime reported full inventory, while its actual stock had been quietly rerouted to a dummy location. The Empire's flawless machine began to stutter. The Krell blamed system errors, then internal sabotage. They tightened security, shut down open channels, and began purging suspect personnel. But the more they clamped down, the slower they moved. And slowness in war was death. Meanwhile, Eli slipped away from the asteroid field and headed deeper into Krell-controlled space. His next target was Relay Station K9, a key hub that linked the Empire's western fleets. If it went dark, even for a few hours, entire squadrons would be blind. He didn't have weapons to destroy it, but he didn't need to. He had something better: human trickery. He approached the station disguised as a damaged Krell scout vessel, broadcasting a fake distress signal in their own language. The station's AI, trained to assist damaged ships, opened its docking bay without question. Eli guided the Nightjar inside, heart pounding. One wrong move, one glitch in the signal, and he'd be vaporized. But the ruse held. Once docked, he released a swarm of modified repair bots, small machines designed to fix hull breaches. Only these bots carried a different payload: magnetic pulse charges. They crawled through the station's maintenance tunnels, planting charges on power conduits, data cores, and coolant lines. Then Eli set the timer and fled. 10 minutes later, Relay Station K9 went dark, not with an explosion, but with a series of quiet system failures. Lights flickered out. Life support stuttered. Communications died. The Krell engineers scrambled, but the damage was too deep, too widespread. It would take days to restore full function. By then, Earth would be ready. On Mars, Governor Carl Dixon received the signal. K9 is down. He gave a single nod. In hidden bunkers beneath the red sands, crews powered up long-range missile silos, weapons built during the early colony days, never used, never tested. Now they locked onto coordinates provided by Eli's data, not to strike Krell worlds, not yet, but to hit their forward listening posts, their early warning satellites, their scout outposts near human space. A warning shot. A message. We see you now. The missiles launched at dawn, streaking into the sky like silver threads. Within hours, 5 Krell observation platforms fell silent. The Empire noticed, and for the first time they felt uneasy. Back on Earth, Lena Ortiz reviewed the reports. Eli's mission was a success. The hackers were causing havoc. Mars had struck back. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Krell would retaliate. They always did. And when they came, they would come hard. She called Captain Eli back. "Get home," she said over a secure channel. "You've done enough," Eli laughed softly. "Not yet. There's one more thing." He had found something during his last pass near K. Rel Space, a hidden fleet staging area near the Ophion Nebula. Dozens of warships gathering in secret, preparing for something big. He sent the coordinates before cutting the line. Lena stared at the star map. The Ophion Nebula was only 3 jumps from Mars Colony Theta. She didn't hesitate. She activated Project Ironclad's first combat wing. 12 destroyers fresh from the lunar yards, crewed by volunteers who had trained in silence and shadow. Their orders were simple. Hide in the Helios drift, wait for the Krell fleet to move, and strike when they were most vulnerable. At the same time, Nora Kim went public. In a broadcast beamed to every neutral system in the Accord, she showed the truth. The footage of Daniel Shaw's execution, the hacked Krell logs proving his innocence, the records of Empire war crimes across a dozen worlds. She didn't ask for pity. She asked for witnesses. "Earth does not seek conquest," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We seek justice. And if the Galaxy Empire will not give it, we will take it." The message spread faster than any weapon. On fringe worlds long oppressed by the Krell, people whispered. On trade stations, merchants shared the data in secret. Even some Empire officers began to question their leaders. Doubt once planted was hard to kill. Eli finally returned to lunar orbit, his ship battered but intact. As he stepped onto the dock, Lena was waiting. She didn't say thank you. She just handed him a new mission file. He opened it. Saw the words, Operation Helios Trap. He nodded. "Let's finish this." Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. But somewhere in the dark, human ships were moving, quiet, fast, and full of fire. The Galaxy Empire thought they knew their enemy. They were wrong. Humans didn't just fight with guns and ships. They fought with minds, with courage, and with the memory of a man who died for peace. And that made them dangerous. Part 4. The Krell fleet emerged from warp near Mars Colony Theta, like a storm of bronze and fire. 30 warships, each larger than a city block, their hulls bristling with plasma cannons and shield emitters. At their center floated the Dread Sovereign, the flagship of High Admiral Korovex, a vessel so massive it cast a shadow over the red planet below. The Empire had come not to negotiate, but to erase. They would burn Mars to glass, they said, and leave its ashes as a warning to Earth. But Mars was not empty. And Earth was not far behind. Deep in the Helios drift, 12 human destroyers waited. They hid among the jagged rocks and ion clouds of the nebula, engines cold, weapons charged, crews silent. Captain Eli Brooks sat in the command chair of the lead ship, the Iron Resolve. His hands rested on the controls, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. He had seen the Krell fleet's path. They were arrogant. They flew in perfect formation, shields up, sensors sweeping, but blind to the tricks waiting in the dark. Lena Ortiz's voice crackled over the secure channel, calm and clear. "Remember the plan. No heroics. Hit hard, hit fast, and vanish. They expect a wall of steel. Give them ghosts." The Krell ships passed the outer edge of the drift. That was the signal. From hidden crevices in the asteroids, human drones launched, not missiles, but EMP mines wrapped in reflective foil. They drifted silently into the Krell formation, mimicking space debris. When the Dread Sovereign's sensors finally flagged them as threats, it was too late. The mines detonated in a chain reaction, not with fire, but with a pulse of raw energy that rippled through the fleet. Krell shields flickered. Systems stuttered. For 3 critical seconds, their network went dark. That was all Earth needed. The 12 destroyers burst from cover like wolves from the trees. They didn't fire from range. They dove straight into the heart of the fleet, weaving between the giant warships, firing point blank. Their railguns punched through weakened shields, tearing into engine nacelles and command towers. Their swarm drones, small, fast, and smart, latched onto Krell hulls and overloaded their coolant lines from the inside. Chaos erupted, A Krell destroyer spun out of control, its thrusters firing wildly. Another collided with a freighter carrying spare munitions. The explosion lit up the drift like a second sun. Alarms blared across the Empire's channels, but their comms were jammed by Earth hackers broadcasting static and false orders in perfect Krell dialect. High Admiral Corvex roared commands from his bridge, but his fleet was unraveling. He had trained for battles against orderly enemies, species that formed lines, followed rules, respected hierarchy. He had never faced humans. Humans didn't care about honor. They cared about winning. Eli targeted the Dread Sovereign's main sensor array. One clean shot from the Iron Resolve's forward cannon shattered the dish. Blind and furious, the flagship fired wildly, its plasma bolts tearing through its own ships by mistake. Cheers erupted on the human bridge, but Eli silenced them with a look. Stay sharp. They're still dangerous, and they were. A Krell cruiser broke from the pack and charged straight at the Iron Resolve. Shields flared red, hull plates buckled. But Eli didn't retreat. He ordered full reverse thrust and fired a cluster of decoy flares. The cruiser veered, confused, right into the path of a second human destroyer, the Red Horizon, which unleashed a full broadside into its exposed flank. The cruiser exploded in a cloud of molten metal. The battle lasted 90 minutes. 90 minutes of fire, silence, and screams across the void. When it ended, 17 Krell ships were destroyed. 9 more were crippled, drifting helplessly. Only 4 managed to flee, their engines sputtering, their pride shattered. Earth lost 3 destroyers. Good ships, brave crews. But they had done the impossible. They had beaten the unbeatable. News of the victory spread faster than light. On Earth, people wept, not from sorrow, but from disbelief and pride. In Geneva, the assembly stood and applauded for 10 full minutes. On Mars, colonists danced in the streets, their faces lit by the distant glow of burning Krell wreckage. Even neutral species in the Celestial Accord took notice. The Virians sent a message of support. The Xanthari opened their ports to human ships. The myth of Krell invincibility was broken, but Lena Ortiz felt no joy. She stood on the lunar command deck, watching the damage report scroll across her screen. "We won a battle," she told Nora Kim, who stood beside her. "Not the war," Nora nodded. "But we changed the story. Now they know we can fight, and others know it too." Back in the drift, recovery teams pulled survivors from the wreckage. Eli walked among the wounded, shaking hands, offering water, listening to their stories. One young engineer, her face streaked with soot, looked up at him and whispered, "We really did it, didn't we?" Eli smiled. "We did. But Shaw started it. We're just finishing what he believed in." Meanwhile, on the Krell homeworld, panic spread through the ruling council. High Overseer Vraktal demanded answers. How could primitive humans defeat their finest fleet? Spies were arrested. Generals were stripped of rank. But the truth was worse than betrayal, it was humiliation. And in the Galaxy Empire, humiliation could not be allowed to stand. Yet for the first time, doubt crept into their ranks. Younger Krell officers questioned old tactics. Merchants worried about trade routes. Families feared their sons would be sent to die against an enemy that refused to play fair. Earth did not celebrate for long. Within hours of the victory, repair crews were already patching hulls, reloading weapons, and training new pilots. Factories ran double shifts. Hackers refined their tools. Mars fortified its defenses. Everyone knew the Empire would return. And next time they would not be so careless. But something had shifted in the balance of power. The Galaxy Empire had struck first, thinking Earth would break. Instead, Earth had bent and then snapped back harder. The stars, once silent witnesses, now hummed with a new truth. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was a storm, and storms do not ask permission before they rage. Part 5. The Galaxy Empire did not send warships this time. They sent a message. A single diplomatic vessel, white and unarmed, drifted into neutral space near the old Titan relay. Its signal was clear. "We seek peace talks." Earth's command center held its breath. Lena Ortiz stared at the screen for a long time before speaking. "It's a trick," she said. But Nora Kim shook her head. "Maybe. But if we refuse, we become the monsters they say we are." So Earth agreed. Not with guns, but with words. The meeting place was the Celestial Accord Station, the same hall where Daniel Shaw had stood before his death. The irony was not lost on anyone. Nora Kim walked into the chamber alone. She wore no armor, only a simple gray suit with the Earth emblem on her lapel. Behind her, holograms displayed evidence, logs from Krell ships, hacked transmissions, the raw footage of Shaw's execution, and testimony from defectors who confirmed he was innocent. She did not shout. She did not beg. She simply laid the truth on the table for all 200 species to see. High Overseer Vraktal sat stiffly in his delegation seat, his carapace dull, his voice quieter than before. "The Empire acted on faulty intelligence," he said through the translator. "A regrettable error?" Nora looked him in his compound eyes. "You killed a man in front of the galaxy and called it justice. That is not an error. That is a crime." Silence filled the room. Then one by one, neutral species began to speak. The Varians demanded reparations. The Zenthari called for an independent tribunal. Even old allies of the Empire, shifted in their seats. The Krell had ruled through fear for centuries. Now that fear was turning to shame, and shame could not hold an empire together. Within days, the Accord voted. The Krell leadership would stand trial for war crimes, including the unlawful execution of a neutral diplomat. It was the first time in history the Galaxy Empire faced judgment from its own system. Fractal protested, but his voice carried no weight anymore. The stars had turned. Earth did not ask for land or ships or tribute. Nora's only demand was simple: never again. The Accord agreed. A new charter was drafted: stronger protections for neutral worlds, limits on Imperial military action, and a permanent Earth seat on the Security Council. Humanity was no longer a guest. It was a guardian. Back on Earth, people gathered in cities and villages to watch the final session. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a quiet cheer rose, not of triumph, but of relief. Children placed flowers at memorials. Veterans stood at attention. In Chicago, Eli Brooks visited Daniel Shaw's parents and handed them a data chip containing every message, every log, every word their son had sent from the stars. "He changed everything," Eli said. Mrs. Shaw held his hand and wept. But peace was not easy. The Krell military splintered. Some factions accepted the ruling. Others refused, calling it betrayal. Skirmishes flared on the outer rim. Earth's fleet stayed ready not to conquer but to protect. Lena Ortiz kept her ships on alert, her eyes always on the dark. She knew empires did not die quietly. They lashed out in their final moments, yet something new was growing in the void. Species once too afraid to speak now formed alliances. Trade routes opened without imperial tolls. Young diplomats from a dozen worlds came to Earth to learn, not to spy. They saw cities that rebuilt after war, farms that fed millions, schools where children learned both science and compassion. They saw a people who fought not for glory, but for the right to live free. One evening, Lena stood with Eli on the lunar observation deck, watching Earth rise over the cratered horizon. "We did it," he said softly. "Not us," she replied. "All of us. The welders, the hackers, the teachers, the kids on Mars. Shaw gave us the reason. They gave us the strength." Below, on the blue-green world, lights twinkled like stars returned home. Factories slowed. Recruiters closed their booths. But the spirit remained. Earth had bled, yes, but it had also proven that even the smallest voice could shake the heavens if it spoke the truth. Years later, historians would call it the Shaw Turning. The moment humanity stopped asking for a place in the galaxy and claimed it by right. But those who lived it never used grand words. They remembered the fear, the loss, the quiet courage of ordinary people who chose to stand when it would have been easier to kneel. And in the halls of the new Accord, a simple plaque now hung beside the main chamber. It bore no name, no title, just a sentence in every known language. Peace is not given. It is defended. The Galaxy Empire still existed, but it was smaller now, humbler. And Earth? Earth watched the stars not with fear but with care, for they knew the universe was vast and darkness always waited at the edge. But so did light, and humans more than any species knew how to carry it.